Hi, this is Charlie Mato-Toyela with Blue Bear Flutes and bluebearflutes.com. Of course, you hopefully have been to my website. I know you've at least seen me once on YouTube, and I do have a couple more videos than that. Actually, we've got countless videos on YouTube. As well as today I was scrolling through my feed on TikTok, and I can't believe how many videos we've posted there. It's incredible. I've seen pictures with my friends in Mexico and pictures of a more recent event we've done, and just some of everything there. I'll have to use the same disclaimer I used most recently in a blog post on our website, and that is, I know there's a lot of you that don't like TikTok, and I completely understand. I myself consider myself to be kind of conservative, and the idea of TikTok and what it does and where it's from and all that kind of stuff has always concerned me. But I do know a lot more about it today. I've actually done some research and found, some great information about it. So even though there are quite a few detriments with regards to TikTok, there are some benefits to it as well. So we've been posting there, to say the least. So if you get a chance, check out our TikTok link that's in this description of this video. Of course, Instagram too, we have countless pictures and videos and all kinds of stuff there, so make sure you check it out. But bluebearflutes.com is the home of our website, where you'll find the latest and greatest Native American flutes. So everybody else says let's get into it. Let's not. What we're going to be doing today and talking about, hopefully for a quick video and hopefully a good and very worthwhile, and a video where both you and I get to learn something. As many of you know, one of the other great new features going on in the world of the internet, telephones, and web browsers and life as we know it today is AI is all over the place. This video is going to explore the possibility of AI designing its own Native American flute. Now, this sounds crazy in my opinion, but it's something that I do want to do so that I can know just how crazy it is. Is it me that's crazy, or is the idea of using AI for all these answers to common questions and problems and whatever crazy? I'm counting on the latter, but I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. It knows a lot. And I honestly have had quite lengthy conversations with AI myself in regards to everything from history to how to do this, that, or the other. Gosh, some things I can't even tell you because they're kind of personal, but I've asked AI a lot of questions, and it's had some reasonable answers. Some of the answers are kind of wonky, I'll have to tell you. I mean, they're like, I don't know how it comes up with this, and I have corrected it on countless occasions. I can tell you one of my favorite questions, and you're welcome to try this yourself, but one of my favorite questions I've asked it is, did all Cherokee Indians move to Oklahoma? And I know this is probably like a really sore topic. As a matter of fact, probably some people watching this video, it might be yanking the Band-Aid off really fast. But initially it says, yeah, they all went to Oklahoma. And then I had it read part of a treaty, the Treaty of New Echota of 1835. I had it read Article 12 to me. And it's like, well, how can you read this article and say we all went to Oklahoma? So anyway, long story short, a very personal matter, mind you, but very interesting to say the least. I'm going to break out my phone and bring out my Chat GPT, which is who I'm currently using. I know there's countless other chats all over the place. Chat.openai.com is what the link is, and I don't know if it matters. This is GPT 3.5. I recently had it help me write a small little speech. I've had it write a couple, well, I say had it write. I proofread everything that I have it write. But I had it write or help me produce a little speech, as well as a couple of letters to varying, politicians or whatever. I'm not really a political type guy, but there's some people I do have to talk to. And I'll be honest with you too. I am using a Samsung phone. I've used Samsung for a long time. I'm kind of lazy when it comes to typing messages. If you find any replies to your emails to me that have misspellings and weird context, 9 times out of 10, that's because I use voice dictation to type. So, as you and I have discussed the Native American flute and that it is part of my business, do you know how they are created? ? Simple enough question, right? And it replies, it's thinking, Oh my goodness gracious, it's got a long reply for this one. Y'all think I'm wordy. I'm not going to read all this to you. Finally, it stopped. It replied with 7 comments. Yes, Native American flutes are typically crafted by hand using traditional methods. The process varies depending on the specific style and tradition of flute making, but it generally involves several key steps. Selecting the wood, it's got a whole blurb about selecting the wood, shaping the flute body. Let's see here. Precise measurements are taken to drill the finger holes in the flute body. This spacing and size of the holes determine the pitch and playability of the flute. Creating a sound channel. I can recognize some of this stuff here. It's getting for me, but these aren't things I've previously told it, mind you. It's, I guess, found this on the web from before. A channel known as the flue is carved into the body. That is probably from content it discovered for me, because not everybody carves their flue into the body as we do. Adding the totem. Many Native American flutes feature a totem or decorative element at the top of the flute. Can be carved, painted, inlaid into the wood. Tuning and testing. Once it's assembled, it is tuned by adjusting the size and shape of the finger holes. The flute maker tests the instrument to ensure it plays correctly and has the desired sound. I'm not making this up. This is what little Mr. AI or Mrs. AI or they AI is telling us right now as we speak. Finishing touches. Finally, the flute is sanded, polished, and yada yada yada. Throughout the process, flute makers often incorporate traditional design, symbols, techniques passed down through generations. I'm presuming it means Native Americans at that point. It didn't make a point, but I'm going to make that point because, you know, but you don't have to be Native American to make a flute, obviously. But if it's talking about traditions and Native American, likewise, if it was talking about traditions and Irish flutes, I would hope that it would say these traditions are handed down by Irish people, you know. So anyway, just kind of help up a little bit of the culture there. Beautiful instrument that carries the culture and artistic heritage of Native American craftsmanship. Do you think that you could create the fingering patterns and design for the sound hole, channel, comma, length, and inside diameter of a 5-hole Native American flute that would be playable ? You see, when I say question mark, it types question mark. If you don't know that you can actually voice dictate to your phone, it is very handy. I am using Google Voice to dictate to my phone, which is pretty handy. I like the Samsung one because it's more portable and doesn't require me to be online, but Google Voice is a little bit, it's better for me because I sometimes dictate it in several different languages, and in order for it to speak those languages, I would have to install voice modules with Samsung, but Google Voice already has most of them, so it recognizes my very bad Berlinish accent in German. Its answer, ooh, the Y word. Brave AI. Yes, I can help you create the fingering patterns and design for a playable 5-hole Native American flute. To start, we'll need to determine the key, flute, blah, 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 blah. Let me know the key and scale you're interested in, and we can proceed from there. I would like to confirm that you're not using existing fingering patterns to do this, that they will be completely designed by you for this particular experiment ? Let's see. Understood. That's not the Y word, but it's not bad. For this experiment, I'll design new fingering patterns and specifications for the sound hole, channel length, inside diameter of a 5-hole Native American flute once we establish the key and scale you'd like to use. Now, I'd like to pause for just a split second here. I made a video about 3 or 4 videos ago, and if you go back and look through the history of my videos, they're going to be 3 or 4 behind this one, where I told you it's basically about the fundamental note. And I've had people contact me through the years saying, I created a flute with this fundamental note. How can I put the fingerings so that it'll play the fingerings for this particular note in this scale? My flute is a 1/2 inch inside diameter and 14 feet long. No, even the AI knows better. That's terrible. The AI knows better. That you have to know where you're going before you can try to get there. So please, if you've created a flute with XYZ fundamental note, before you even tell me what the fundamental note is, let's find out what the diameter what key you're trying to make the flute in, if you know. And if you don't know, and if you don't know keys, that's fine. Start from where I'm telling you now. Let's determine what kind of materials you have on hand. And from there, let's make a flute based on the materials you have on hand and other fingering patterns that are close to those materials already. That's kind of what this thing is asking me, which is great because that's what we needed to ask. Since I already have a tube with a 3/4 of an inch diameter inside, comma, and the tube is about 20 or so inches long, comma, let's use it, and can we make a flute? I'm correcting my note, I deleted flute. 5-hole flute in the key of A minor pentatonic? Question mark. Let's see what it says now. Great. Well, here's a geez, blah, 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 blah. My God, you're talking up a storm. I mean, y'all think this thing just wrote like 3 books on the subject for me. Great, let's proceed with designing a 5-hole Native American flute in the key of A minor pentatonic using your existing tube. For the fingering patterns, we'll follow the standard A minor pentatonic scale, which includes A, C, D, E, G. Here are fingering patterns for each note. Low A, cover all 5 holes. This part it knows from me because I've had it help me do something interesting that we'll talk about in a later video. C, leave the bottom hole uncovered. D, leave the bottom 2 holes uncovered. E, leave the bottom 3 holes uncovered. G, leave the bottom 4 holes uncovered. And high A, leave all holes uncovered. Not bad. Now that I did teach it, okay, because it's going by a system that I have created that me and the old AI here have been kind of working up something that is a little bit of a secret, but not completely. Eventually you'll know about it. If I didn't want you to know about it, I wouldn't have read all that. Based on your tube's specifications, we can calculate the positions for for the sound holes. The exact positions may vary slightly. My God, how many times have I told y'all that? Please. Now this, once again, I didn't tell it how to make a flute. This is the first time ever I'm reading this. The exact positions may vary slightly depending on the desired tuning and the flute maker's preferences. But here is a rough guide. The first hole, which is closest to the mouthpiece, approximately 5.5 inches from the top. I'm about to go get a tube and we're going to start doing this. Okay, so right off, and of course I've been making flutes for 38 years and this thing here is about, I guess OpenAI is about a year old at this point, not quite. So keep that in mind. I have to forgive it some of its failings. It gave me the placement of 6 holes. And of those 6 holes, they are representing low A, which is all holes covered, C, D, E, G, and high A. Now, on my 6-hole flutes, that's actually still not quite how they play because the 6th fingering will be the high C above high A on your flute. But this thing gave me the placement of 6 holes for 6 fingerings to play these 6 notes. And I know this is a little difficult for you to follow, but for a flute that has 5 holes plus the octave, 5 notes plus the octave, meaning the A tone through high A, you only need 5 holes to play that. So it kind of inferred an idea that it's kind of like one of those pictures of a puzzle. I can't remember the name of it, but it's like a form in nature that can't exist. It's like a cone that comes back around and loops back through itself. It's an impossibility because it provided 5 fingerings. And I tried to read back over to understand. I'll just read to you what it says. The first hole closest to the mouthpiece, approximately 5.5 inches from the top, would be the low A. That's wrong. That's completely backwards. It should be 5.5 inches from the bottom if it's the low note, but let's go with what it's got. The second hole, 7.5 inches from the top, would be the C. Third hole, 9.5 inches from the top, would be the D. Fourth hole, approximately 11.5 inches from the top would be the E. Then the fifth hole, 13.5 inches from the top for the G. And then it says the sixth hole, even though you heard me say 5 holes, approximately 15.5 inches from the top. This is all great stuff, really great ideas. It placed the fingerings 2 inches apart, by the way, if you didn't catch that. Each and every fingering is 2 inches from the other. So it'll be like this, but that aside, it also gave me 6 fingerings for 5 notes plus the octave, which would be achieved, the bass note of the scale being achieved by the all holes covered. It says that they're approximately placed. Would you like to proceed with this design, or do you have specific adjustments? You will have to make adjustments since the lowest note would be furthest from the mouthpiece, period. Therefore, the bass A note or root of the scale will be all holes covered, and then the next note up the scale from that, comma, let me take that comma out, that will be releasing the fingering closest to the bottom furthest from the mouthpiece, period. Can you recalculate your fingerings based on that? Question mark. Not to mention it needs to tell me where to put the sound hole, because it hasn't said that yet. Likewise, comma, this is supposed to be a 5-hole flute, meaning 5 fingerings, and since in the minor pentatonic scale, the bass note is achieved by covering all 5 holes, and the octave higher of the bass note is achieved by uncovering all 5 holes, comma, how would we proceed, question mark. While it's typing this and trying to figure out what I'm saying, it had already recalculated the fingerings, but still gave me 6 holes for whatever reason. It will need to realize that it's going to need a sound hole also. Let's see what it says. Okay. Approximate positions for the sound holes based on your tube specifications. The first hole closest to the mouthpiece is 15.5 inches away from the top of the flute. I would like to point out that the top of the flute is where the mouthpiece is, and the bottom of the flute is the furthest from the mouthpiece, sometimes called the distal end. Let's see what it says. Rewrote everything again, still has 6 holes. I really feel like it's pulling this off of somebody's website, the design. It doesn't tell me, and it's probably a synonymous conclusion. The first hole closest to the mouthpiece, 5.5 inches. Second hole, 7.5 inches. Okay, now hold on just a minute. This, it might be right. The first hole, which is closest to the mouthpiece, it means the sound hole. It's not talking about the air supply channel or anything of that, but we're presuming, but it's still labeling it for low A, which is really wrong. The second hole is 7.5 inches from the bottom of the flute. That's a possibility, which we'll call that the first hole. Third hole, 9.5 inches from the bottom. Fourth hole, 11.5 inches. Just going 2 inches up every time on a 3/4 inch tube, which I already know isn't going to produce an A, but that's not what this is about. This is an experiment to see what happens. Fifth hole, 13.5 inches from it, and the sixth hole, 15.5 inches from the bottom of the flute. It's calling the distal end now, since I fed it that. The position should provide a playable flute, A minor pentatonic. We're covering all holes, blah, 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 blah. It's trying to school me on where the fingerings are and how they go, which has been a little bit of a challenge to teach it. Let me know if you have any other specifications. I am presuming, based on your schematics and the fact that this is a 5 playable hole fingering placement flute, comma, One bad thing about text dictation is it sometimes spells whole with a W when I mean it with an H. That the first fingering or hole, don't let me confuse it, hole that you are talking about is the sound producing hole, comma, is that correct? Question mark. I didn't tell it why, but yes, that's correct. Does it matter where I put the air supply hole above that sound producing hole, comma, how wide the hole is, comma, how wide the flue is, or the distance between the air supply hole and the sound hole, question mark? These are things that should have told me already. Let's see. Oh, another book. Now this really did sound like me writing this because some of this is, and no, I don't read that fast. Yes, the placement and size of the air supply hole, also known as the fetish hole, which I've never heard that before, above the sound producing hole can affect the playability and sound of the flute. Here are some considerations. Placement. 1. The air supply hole is typically positioned above the sound hole and closer to the mouthpiece. This placement allows a player to easily reach the air supply hole while playing. I don't know what it's thinking. It must be trying to build a transverse flute, but we can still work with this. Size. The size of the air supply hole can affect the air pressure and airflow into the flute. That's not something I would have ever told y'all before, ever. It's true, but it's not the right way to look at it, but that's okay because it's thinking from a scientific point of view. I'm not complaining. A larger hole may require less breath to pressure, but can also lead to a louder, more forceful sound. Very case in point, but it doesn't tell you anywhere in this text that larger hole will also make your flute go sharp. In other words, if you make an A flute based on my schematics and you make its sound hole the size that my book tells you to make the sound hole for an A flute, you make it wider than that by, say, double. It'll play. It'll be louder. It'll change the tone of the flute by leaps and bounds. It'll make it sound more like a silver flute because of the width of it, and less like a native flute, and doesn't follow native flute historical patterns. So keep that in mind. But it also makes it go sharp, anywhere from a half step to, say, almost 2 steps. At least a step and a half can be achieved by changing the width alone of the sound hole. The spread of it does make some varying changes, and we'll talk about that in future videos, but what I'm talking about right now is the width of the sound hole. If you double the size of the sound hole on an A flute, I'm just doing this off of my head, off the cuff, as they say. If you double the width of a typical key of A flute's sound hole from whatever pattern you're using, mine or anybody else's, it's going to cause it to go almost a whole step sharp. It'll be like 3/4 of a step sharp, unless your flute inside diameter is a little more than an inch, in which case it'll make it go more like a step and a half sharp. It's just math I'm doing in my head. And don't ask me for that math. There aren't numbers involved. It's kind of between me and, flutes. Okay, done with my rambling. A wider flue may result in a richer, fuller sound, while a narrower flue may produce a thinner, more focused sound. That's not how I would describe it, but that's okay. I mean, we're talking about a child here telling me this. The distance between the air supply hole and sound hole can affect the responsiveness and tuning of a flute. Now that I know for a fact is pulling from somebody else's website because it is not exactly correct. It has a basis in reality, but isn't exactly right because I've already made videos about the length of the air channel. Let's see here. A shorter distance may result in a quicker response, but may require more precise control of breath pressure for tuning, exact, among other things. A longer distance may provide more room for adjustment, but may require more effort to play. Not exactly true because we're talking about microcosms there, so that's not right. It's important to experiment with different configurations, my words right here, to find the placement and size that works best for you and your flute. Exactly. Additionally, the specific characteristics of the flute, such as the tube diameter and length, can also influence these factors, so adjustments may be necessary based on that individual instrument. Okay, Well, let's measure this thing and do this. I'm going to use this last, most recent fingering and sound hole placements. It basically told me in its own words that it doesn't matter where you put the air supply hole. This way will make it do this way will make it do that, which is kind of oversimplification, and it's reading from somebody's website who I probably don't agree with, but it's okay. Let's use what it's got. I'm going to set this phone over here. We're going to take these measurements. Okay, first hole closest to the mouthpiece. Now, for whatever reason, it says distal end here. Let's pretend that that is its confusion. This is a piece of western cedar. We're going to put this hole at 5.5 inches from the top because it says closest to the mouthpiece. You can see that right here, closest to the mouthpiece. Okay, that's that top word, first hole. Let's go with that. There'll be some screen captures added to some of this too, I'm sure. I think we've talked about that. And it says for low A, you know, it's just confused. That's okay. Let's see what happens when we, and y'all correct me if I'm wrong, distal means the bottom, right? The furthest from the mouthpiece. Let's see where we're at here. The next hole we need to drill, it says second hole, but let's see what happens if that's 7.5 inches right here. I'm just going to mark these kind of lightly because I have a feeling we're going to go back and ask it another question before it can actually help me produce something that's going to make a sound. Let's see here. That's 9.5 inches, and then we have another one, 11.5 inches, and then finally another one, 13.5 inches. We're getting real close to that sound hole there. And then another one, 15.5 inches, which is where the sound hole basically is. Okay, so this is way not right, but let's go back. Since it doesn't understand the concept of distal and it tells me all the measurements are from the top, let's do it that way. So 5.5, 7.5, 9.5, 11.5. Did I say 12.5? Oh, no, that's 13.5 right there. Okay, so those are the fingerings, and another one 15.5 inches. I just don't understand why it keeps producing a 6-hole flute. Now, let me just show you for reference here. Oh my God. I'm gonna have to use my pinky on that one. No. If this were a kenna, we might could play it like that. And I'd be willing to make a kenna out of it, but it knows what I'm talking about. Because remember it said the fettage, the flue, the air supply channel, it knows what I'm talking about. Okay, so had to take a breather for just a minute. That's nuts. Oh my goodness. So I'm going to ask it a couple of other questions, and I really want to build this flute so that we can say we made a flute with AI at some point in my life. Now, it may learn better down the road. Unfortunately, I don't think it's watching YouTube videos right now for information. That is kind of fortunate too, if you think about it. And I'm not putting YouTube down by any means. Any platform has some crazy whack info on it. Now, there's some good stuff on it. Anyway, I don't have a lot of, I have some, but not a lot of measurements posted anywhere. I'm going to ask it where I got these measurements from. If I may ask, comma, where did you get these measurements, question mark. Now, something else with AI too, it probably doesn't care if I put commas or question marks, but I do voice dictation a lot to reply to y'all's emails, so, and a lot of your YouTube comments, so just to speed things up. I mean, I read over it. The measurements and considerations I provided are based on general principles and practices in Native American flute making, as well as traditional flute designs. While there are standard guidelines that flute makers often follow, these measurements can vary. But this, let me tell you, my youngest son, shoot, probably all my kids would probably tell you, but that sounds exactly like something AI would tell you, because it's basically saying, I don't know, but this is what I'm making up for you at the instant. Not putting open AI down or ChatGPT down or any other, AIs. So whenever y'all become our overlords in the future, don't think I was poking fun at you. But anyway, that is a typical AI response. Keep in mind, these programmed responses are based on algorithms that people wrote. Okay? There's some predictability there, AI. If you know what I'm talking about, future AI, I still know. I know what you're thinking. And I know how to destroy it. I've watched Terminator 5 times. So, anyway, it's coming up with some ideas, and I'm absolutely cool with that. I need a flute that has 5 fingerings and a sound hole before I can produce this thing. Your measurements look very interesting, and one thing I haven't told you is I've been making Native American flutes for over 38 years at this point of my life. So I can tell that not only are they difficult fingerings to play based on your design, but they likely won't produce any of the tones we're trying to create either, period. I'm completely fine with that because this is an experiment. There is 2 requirements. There is 2 requirements. Sounds like I'm speaking Norwegian. I'm not putting Norwegians down. I've been studying your language for some time now. There's no is or are. Are 2 requirements I need, comma. First of all, the flute has to have 5 playable fingerings, comma, not 6. And second, I need to know, I sound like one of my favorite actors in the movie Rush Hour 2. I need to know where to put the sound hole and the air supply holes. Correcting one little bit of text. Okay, now, please God, make me a flute. Let's give me some placement again. Let's see what it's got. Sound hole approximately 16.5 inches. We are working with something here. So there again, it's calling the mouthpiece the distal end, which, please, somebody post a comment in here. Is this correct or not? Oh my God, this is insane. 15.5 inches, 16.5 inches. Where are you getting this? This is supposed to be a fingering based on your judgment. Okay, based on your tube specifications, 3/4 of an inch diameter, and blah 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 blah. The position for the sound hole and air supply holes can be determined as follows: 16.5 inches, air supply hole 1 inch above the sound hole. Okay, so let me tell y'all, I am so sorry, flute. Oh God, this is like Doodle Bob flute off of SpongeBob. This is awful. So this is the air supply hole, and that's the sound hole. It's the first figurine. And then all these others. Okay. It hurts to laugh. The positions are approximate. I'm not laughing at you. I know you don't know how to make flutes, so it's okay, future AI. Don't forget. Please let me know if these adjustments... Okay, comma, I'm going to try it. That sounds like a great plan. Oh God, it hurts. Let's go drill some holes out and see what happens.
Let's go.
Air supply hole. Sound hole. You know, after I drill this hole, I'm just going to cover it up. That is not a good idea. That is a terrible idea. This one, who knows? I mean, it's 2 inches or so from the top. This is quite a stretch for an old man to play these fingerings. I'm going to keep this flute, by the way. I'm not going to destroy it. Anytime I do an experiment, I usually like to keep it. Okay, I just realized I need to ask it another question. Now, I didn't ask it the size of the sound hole or any of that. I didn't ask it the size of the fingerings, which, you know, I mean, I need a guide. They don't have to be perfect, but I can't tune these holes to play an A minor scale. They won't work for that, because 3 of them will be like this big around, and the flute's not that large. Here, let me show you. See? Anyway, I didn't ask it about the depth of the track or any of that. I'm going to do it really quick like. And originally I wasn't going to use burning tools on this, but I can't see any way that this Frankenstein monstrosity is going to perform or produce any type of sound whatsoever unless I do. I was hoping that it had a clue about sound design, which I know it does because we have discussed tones and notes and a lot of stuff that it really does know. As a matter of fact, I have seen where AI, not just the fancy ones you get to watch on YouTube, like somebody making, you know, going back to SpongeBob, Mr. Krabs sing Welcome to the Jungle. You know, I mean, I've seen a lot more than that. I've seen where people have caused, and I even, you know, back before AI was created, there was a program I used to use called Band in a Box. That sucker's been around forever. Leave me a comment if you've ever used Band in a Box. Chances are nobody has, but it's really cool. I used to use it to make a sad lullaby into a Johnny Cash style honky tonk song, and it could actually do that before AI was even a thing, before consumers knew that AI existed. I mean, chances are it's probably been around for a couple thousand years and we just been living inside of its matrix here, but anyway, so these days you can actually have AI help you change the Lord of the Rings song to sound like it was written by I don't know, Danny Elfman or something, you know. Howard Shore to Danny Elfman, and that's, you know, that's complex. It really is as a composer. But on the short end of things, you can make it sing Britney Spears by, you know, SpongeBob. So there's a lot of stuff you can do with AI that is amazing, that it knows how to tune and change and modulate sound and tone. I'm not saying ChatGPT's got that going on, but we have had extensive discussions about tones and melodies and this, that, and the other, and I've had it write some neat stuff. So I know that that's a possibility. I do need to delve into some of the other music AIs in order to do some of the fancy type stuff that they've been doing with it, but it does know that. And it knows, you know, some things about the diameters of holes and what have you. So, what diameter should the sound hole and or any of the fingerings be to start with, question mark? Wow. Oh, let's do that. The diameter of the sound hole is typically smaller than the diameter of the flute's tube. Really? You don't say. Now, oh gosh, there's so many wheels upon wheels. I don't think this thing, honestly, I don't think AI can think as fast as I can. And if it can't think as fast as I can, I mean, I've got a lot of stuff going on. I do own an antique flute. It's a large single chamber, single note flute with an adjustable plug in the bottom of it. The inside diameter is about 4.5 or 5 inches. It's huge. It's this tall. I don't believe we've used it in any videos. I bought it from an antique store. The sound hole of that flute is, honest to God, about the size of the inside of the diameter of the flute. I am not kidding. But that's not in the Native American flute world. That's something different. It has a lead mouthpiece. I mean, it's a while. And it's some people that may not have known what to do about some of those kind of things. But, you know, I'm not putting anybody down about their skills and craftsmanship. This is an ancient flute I'm talking about that I have. Well, incredibly antique. It's aged. They've been made this way since the 1700s. Mine was made in the late 1800s. I mean, so giving this thing credit where it's due, but it says let's make the diameter of the sound hole 3/8 to a 1/2 inch. I'm going to make this diameter a 1/2 inch, okay, y'all? I know it's going to be great. So The diameter of the fingerings, the holes that covered and uncovered to produce different notes, are usually smaller than the sound hole. I'm so glad it wrote than instead of then, like so many of you. A starting point for the fingerings diameter could be about 1/4 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch. That's a jump. Again, the size can be adjusted based on the playability and sound quality. It's important to experiment with different sizes to find out what works best for you. I mean, this is like, oh, I've got to set this thing far away from me for just a second so that I don't do anything rad. Let's start some sound holes, shall we? How about the sound hole? I do have to change my router bit out to do this, which is something that it didn't mention. It didn't tell me anything about needing a flat area for that flute to go in. I mean, you don't have to have it, but we're talking about human beings here, AI. Please don't think that you can fool me at the moment. I do see you all over the place. Now, I'm not kidding. And I don't normally share this kind of thing because, there again, I am not into politics. But I have seen true CG and AI in political presentations by leaders of the world. I have seen it. It wasn't made up. It wasn't somebody else saying, "Charlie, look at this." It wasn't on Instagram. It wasn't on, TikTok. I seen this for myself in live footage from quote unquote leaders, and some of you already know where I'm going with this, of the world. No, you can't fool me. So what I've done is made a flat section there. I'm going to go ahead and bevel this just slightly so it doesn't get in the way of my first fingering. Okay, so there's a couple of things I had to take for granted that AI didn't know to do, and that's one, I had to put a plug in here. It didn't say to do that, but I mean, you got to have one. There has to be a partition, not a plug necessarily. I mean, the way we used to make flutes out of two pieces where they're split in half, the same way we make our drones today, that is a plug inside of the flute. This, when we drill them out these days, I push a plug inside of the flute and glue it. A lot of flute makers out there tell you that there's nothing glued on their flutes if they've drilled them out. That's not true. The plug has to be glued in, otherwise temperature change and the sucker will fall right out. And I didn't find that out from experience. I know that from experience. Not from plugs or what have you, but from a number of things. It's just the nature of wood. Wood changes shape and size in the humidity or the temperature. So, air supply hole, sound hole, first finger, second, third, fourth, 5, 6 fingerings on a 5-hole flute. Please, this thing is just, oh. We're doing this. So, making a sound hole. It didn't say how deep to make the sound hole. I guess with its measurements I could have made it square, but I'm just going to make it about a 1/2 inch wide. Right there. That's between 3/8 and a 1/2 inch. It also didn't tell me to put a taper on the splitting edge, but we're going to do that because if I don't, it'll sound like garbage. I mean, I can't let this experiment go completely down the toilet. I got to see what happens. Okay. Here we go. Just reshaping some of it. I'm going to put a slant on this little place I used to call the knife edge, and still do on so many occasions. I'm also going to file it just a little bit. It's not really important to see that, just so I can see how big it is, how much of it's charred wood and how much of it is not. There was a crack in this piece of wood on my dowel, and I filled it and I super glued it. If I go back and resand it, you won't even know it was there. But the super glue actually does a pretty good job of that. It didn't tell me that the track needed to be about the same width of the sound hole, or the air supply hole needs to be the same either. We're going to give it some slack. I just can't, I want this to work in some way. We're going to have to put a piece of leather on that one. Gosh. Oh. Any of you that are just seeing my videos for the first time and have no idea why I'd asked AI to make a 5-hole instead of a 6-hole flute, probably have no way of knowing how disappointed I am about this thing giving me 6 fingerings instead of 5 when I tell it 5. The math behind the scale and everything is just out the window. But if you don't know my take on 6-hole flutes and traditional 6-hole flutes, then I distinguish between the two of them, like modern 6-hole flutes versus traditional ones. You might ought to look into that on my YouTube channel here. You'll find a lot more information about how traditional 6-hole flutes are made, and about you know, the correct placement of the fingerings versus what people do today, and the whole keeping the 3rd finger covered up is wrong in my opinion. I'm almost hesitant saying that because I know some of the people I'm going to be advertising this video to watch, and a lot of those are hecklers on something other than platforms. They're not in-person ones. They're different kind. Anytime I throw the word tradition out there, being a Native American myself, I am allowed to speak about this. It really hurts their feelings, and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I hear them at home right now screaming, "You're wrong, you're so wrong. You don't know traditions. Your native family is this, or they're that." Let me tell you something. I know who my native family is. Okay, so just for schlocks and giggles, let's see if this sucker makes a sound. Yes. Yes, it does. Ooh. I'm going to file this splitting edge down just a little bit right here. This is something that will help your flutes play better if you're a flute maker watching this video. The edge of the track right there, if you give it just a slight bevel so that it kind of dips down, don't do the same thing on the top up here. Historically, that was done. Unless you're really, really good at it, don't ever do that. But this will help your flute play like night and day. Also, that bevel has the potential of changing the tone of the flute. It'll actually drop it. Like that little bevel right there can drop the flute a half step or so, depending on how much you bevel it. What I'm going to do right now is square up this track just a little bit. And while y'all come and take a look at the track on this pile of flutes here, I'm going to sand the edge of my flute block down a little bit. Okay, something else I'm going to show you too. If you're a flute maker and you want to perfect the sound of your flute, it'll actually give it a much richer tone if you round the bottom edge of your block as well. I have been putting this slant on it forever and a day. There's a couple of reasons I do that. To be honest with you, there's people out there that are professing that putting a cover over the sound hole or side wind blockers on the sound hole or countless other things. I'm not stepping on y'all's toes. I just want to let you know there is a point at which that is effective and a point at which it's not effective. The wind is always going to affect a flute, no matter what. All flutes have the potential to wet out. Some flutes are less likely to wet out, and if you want to do that naturally, you can burn this track instead of inlay some plastic into it. But if you bevel that edge right there, and then bevel the edge of the block on the bottom, so what this is causing, let me show you with my hands, it goes like this. Okay, so as the air's coming out, it goes up and over. It's like the difference between a long barrel shotgun and a short barrel, which is mildly illegal in the United States, but you know, historically it's happened. So you get a wider spread of your air and it's not as focused. That does present a problem down the road if you make it too big and too this and too that. Like I said, you have a point at which you can do things here, but it also makes more of the air hit the splitting edge exactly where it needs to go, and gives it potential for quite a bit of it to go down into the flute, which is kind of one of those things you want to do somewhat. So if you want to look at it, you can see the depth of my track there. I think you've got a good eye on that. I'm going to squeezy clamp this sucker down because it is the quickest and easiest way to hold your flute block in place. Let me see if I'm going to be able to hold these fingerings. Oh. Let's see what the bottom note sounds like. I'm not covering a hole. There's a hole that's uncovered, I can tell. This just ain't happening. Let's burn some fingerings. Maybe that'll help. Okay. I'm going to start with this one between 1/4 and 3/8 of an inch, and likewise, There's 3 holes so far. I'm going to take this off and change my tool out over here so I can reach it better. And after I get all 3 other holes burned out, I'm going to go grab a piece of duct tape while y'all are staring at this flute. Okay. Any of you that might be wondering why I'm using squeezy clamps up here instead of my signatory magnets that I've always used? Well, we've gotten to the point that we like to use stainless steel burning tools in the shop. I don't want to promote them to you because the cost nowhere nearly reflects your value if you buy a stainless steel burning tool and you're going to make 1 to 100 flutes. This is a waste of your time. If you're making a couple thousand flutes a month or so, something, you know, I don't want to overpad the work here, but if you're making a bunch of flutes, stainless steel does the same job that the other metals do, the high carbon steel, but it doesn't get worn out as quickly. So if you're making a lot of flutes and you're using burning tools, which I know for the most part there's not people making as many flutes as we do that use burning tools for the job, or at least there used to not be anyway. Stainless steel does a good job because it doesn't erode as quickly as these do. These actually, the iron bonds with the carbon and they turn into stainless, but because it's not done on purpose or in a real metal smithing scene, it's not homostasis in the metal. So the only stainless is on the outside of it and it flakes off. So in the stainless steel, it is homostasis, am I saying that right? Anyway, homostatic. Anyway, the carbon and the iron have mixed together properly, and because of that it gives you that finer sheen, and it also makes it to where it doesn't bond to carbon as quickly as it does in the iron form. So it's kind of a long story short. These iron tools do a much better job at producing quick results and controllable results. You'll burn a sound hole into a flute with this in a split second too big and mess it up unless you've got experience, like me and my family have for all this time. Also, a round burning tool. You notice this one is not stainless and it's round. We do have round stainless tools, but they don't do as nearly a good job as this one does. It has to do with heat dispersion. I won't go into that, but anyway, that's why you see this balancing act going on instead of a magnet holding it in place. Now, just going to true them up so they're all about the same size. Okay, so one thing that we discussed off camera when I went to go grab this tape is that the reason that I don't use stainless with magnets is because good stainless doesn't stick to magnets. Iron or steel, on the other hand, sticks to magnets, but good stainless doesn't. Just FYI, you know, it does allow us to do a lot of things because our burning tool that we use for our stamp, our bear stamp, we put by hand, not with laser. I mean, I've got a laser, but that's not what we use it for. it balances better on these squeezy clamps than on a magnet. So oftentimes all that's different metals anyway, and they don't stick to it either. So FYI. I went ahead and brought this back with me so that I could show you the fingering size. Let me put this in inches. Oh wait, that was inches. Sorry about that. This is 1/3 of an inch. So if 1/4 of an inch is 0.25 and 3/8 is what is that? 3/8 is not 0.8. That's point. Somebody post that in the comments. What is 3/8 in metric terms? And I'm pretending like I don't know it because I actually use it all the time. But anyway, so that's what it is. Of course, the other side of this caliper is made for measuring inside of the fingering or hole. And it says it's 1/4, so that's kind of like, maybe it is 1/4, but that's a different hole too. So let's make that a little bit more accurate. Now, I would also like to point out something about AI or finding fingerings on the internet. Over the years, countless people, including 3 of the developers that have developed their own versions of an automatic fingering calculator online, have contacted me and got my input. And I feel like every time that they have contacted me and got my input, I have lost a potential friend or comrade in the process, because I think they want this definite, this is the answer, when there is not a definite, this is the answer. And I've always tried to tell you guys that by giving you for instances and parables and, you know, metaphors and everything I could think of to make that happen. But anyway, it's important to point out that just because you find the answers to your questions, you know, especially the Trail of Tear thing I talked about earlier in the removal. Trail of Tears did happen. The name isn't, you know, what people probably called it at the time. It came after the Indian Removal Act of 1830. And, you know, honestly, the Chickasaws went out before that. The Choctaws went out in 1830. The Treaty of Dancing Rabbit, not all of them went out. It's really worth reading about. I do have a video. This is going to be coming out pretty soon. I've mentioned that in a couple of other videos. But with regards to anything, don't always take, and not even necessarily for me, don't always take for granted what you find online is the truth or that it's accurate. Or, you know, to be honest with you, if we were living in the Matrix and AI wanted us to think a certain way, it could post all kinds of stuff online, and if people follow it, then, you know. So those fingerings and those automatic fingering placement applications that people created, I mean, it started happening back when Java was the thing. And one of my people I knew, I'm sorry, I can't call them friends anymore, created a Java applet that would tell you where to put your fingerings based on the diameter and everything. It doesn't accomplish what it is you're going to want it to accomplish. It's going to make you angry, which in some ways makes flute makers richer, because eventually you'll give up on it and buy one instead of trying to make one. I'm not that person. I don't want to stop you from learning how to make something or do something. I want you to learn how to do it. And this experience here has been one that has taught me something. It's probably taught the AI something. And hopefully you've learned something and gained something that has enriched your life as well. Whether you're a flute maker, a flute player, somebody that just stumbled on a video by accident online, there's nothing that can account for actual human experiences. When I used that experience a moment ago that I had mentioned, asking AI about the removal, I know that there's Native people that stayed all over the Southeast during the removal, and some of them are documented, very well documented. Not all of them are, you know, a member of this tribe or that tribe, and not all of them have their names on this roll or that roll. It's unfortunately a hard life lesson for people who have professed those idealisms to learn that that's wrong. And, you know, there's some ways to teach people things, and unfortunately, there are some ignorant people in the world that can't be taught things. And, you know, we all do what we can do to try to prevail I will give you this one of my favorite things. I've said it in other videos, is that the truth is in the eye of the beholder. And you know, when Yoda talks about these perfect truths being the way to the dark side, they really are. You know, there is a range of truthfulness, and that's looking at it from the perspective of someone who has been trying to achieve that level of perfection in his life. Not everything's this way and everything's that way. Not that level of perfection. The one that helps me understand what the real truth is. And the truth is that the truth is in the eye of the beholder. It really is. Ooh, an actual note. It's because my fingers are able to cover the holes better now that I've made them larger. Let's uncover one of the holes. Wait a second. It's trying to produce another note and it's overblown and jumping octave. That's okay. Now, I don't know what kind of Native American flute sound we're trying to accomplish, but wow. Let's look at the tuner while I'm doing this. It didn't tell me to cut off any holes or any length of the flute. It's probably making a G or a G sharp. I'm just guessing because I can't really hear the tone that clearly. Let's see what it looks like. Ooh, F sharp. I was way off. And just as a handy-dandy reference, sometimes we make flutes and scales we don't remember. Let's look at the F sharp notes. F sharp, A, B, C sharp, E, F sharp. So the F sharp's a little flat, that's okay. The A is a little bit sharp, more than what I'd like it to be. And it jumps straight to C, a sharp C, mind you, not anything near a B. I don't remember there being an E flat in F sharp. That's a perfect E flat in the F sharp scale. Take that, Pythagoras. F sharp, yay! It made the same note again. Let's see where we're at. Look at the flute here. So, all holes covered was an F sharp. Uncover the first hole was an A. The next one was a sharp C. The next one was E flat, which is, hold on, stay right there. Let me look at this one more time. This is painful to play, by the way. The things I do for you guys. A, almost a good C. E flat is in the scale, but it's actually another note before it gets to the F sharp again. So it almost made a perfect 4-hole flute, almost, because these notes here will almost produce the correct ones for the scale, almost. This one's a little bit too much out to make it perfectly in the scale, but I'm going to put some tape over these top 2 holes in a minute and see if we can play a 4-hole flute out of it. So that's the F sharp. That's a G sharp for whatever reason. We'll just throw one of those in there for the sake of it. And then this note, which I don't think is in reality, is a B. There actually is a B in the F sharp scale. It's half an octave, or excuse me, it's an octave below that, but it's in the F sharp scale. Now this was my friend as I created all the flute fingering charts that we used. And if you don't know, now you know. Oh gosh. Not one of my favorite artists, sorry. I'm a Tupac fan, y'all know that. And they were friends for a minute, and then not for eternity. We presume. I mean, I've had people point out some things, but if you don't know, all of the fingering charts, all the size of the patterns for every flute that we offer today has branched off of one of 2 traditional flutes. Our 6-hole flute is made based on 6-hole fingering patterns with the correct inside diameter. Got a video on that. If you haven't watched it, you can watch me make a modern 6-hole flute versus a traditional 6-hole flute. But using the correct fingering patterns for A, not in the key of A, but A, any one 6-hole flute that had been historically recorded. Not playing, the fingerings were recorded. And my 5-hole flutes, which make up the ones that I generally prefer to offer people, all of their fingering patterns, as you see in my previous video, you really should watch that one, about, you know, the fingering placement of the distal end, and oh my gosh, I made a flute, you know, here's the bass note of the flute, where do the fingerings go? Anyway, all the rest of my fingering patterns that are 5-hole flutes are based loosely on a 5-hole flute that one of my very dear friends, who was actually a distant cousin of mine. I mean, we're distant cousins, but at what point that starts and stops, I don't know. In some languages, we call each other cousin regardless. But he had one that, there again, some close friends of the family had brought down from Cherokee, North Carolina, that had been making flutes for a while. And as they told me, it was a copy of a copy. And it's a beautiful flute. I've probably posted some pictures of it somewhere. I think I've got some somewhere. I've played it a bunch for y'all. And based on those fingerings, I stretched these holes this way and these holes this way and this diameter that way and the length of the flute and all this stuff to eventually come up with the fingering patterns that are in my book and that are everywhere else today. All of the 5-hole flutes that we make are based on that 5-hole flute. Granted, I changed the placement of the holes and the size of the sound hole and everything, but it's like, you know, if you've ever unsuccessfully tried to, oh gosh, what's the word that we use for saying that I was trying to change the picture to make it look good? We always use this one word. It's based on a piece of software that everybody uses. Anyway, when y'all can post that in the comments below. But when we try to make our images more photoshopped, sometimes if you stretch them this way, it makes you look fat, or if you shrink them this way, it makes you taller, it makes you look skinny. That's kind of what I did with our patterns, and it produced flutes that play great today. I mean, a lot of trial and error, but that duct tape, that's how I did it. Let's see what it plays like. Let's see if I can do this. So I can play it as a 4-hole flute. That's me. That's my experience and my skill set. Watch my fingers. So that's the F sharp that I'm overblowing and causing it to produce. It did make a flute that I can play uncomfortably and unhappily, and it won't be something that I'll be making more of using AI anytime soon. Basically, it's human beings that created Native American flutes to start with. If you want, or even think you want, to play a Native American flute, think about what that is. I will tell you, recently on Facebook, a friend of mine in my tribe posted a story about a German man that was adopted by some Indian people. I don't remember the situation that caused his family to not raise him. There is a good story about that the Eastern Band has historically posted about a person named Drowning Bear. You can read that story. I believe you can still see it on the Eastern Band's website. If you don't see it on the Eastern Band's website, you can do what I do when I'm trying to find information from tribes' websites that have erased it. You can use Web Archive and type their old web address in there and peruse it that way. Not pointing out any other tribes that do that kind of thing, or the Eastern Band may have. Shoot, my tribe might have done it. I know I used to have a dozen other websites before bluebearflutes.com, so anyway. They have an interesting story about someone named Drowning Bear. Someone who the last name is a friend of mine today, has the last name of Drowning Bear. But this other story was about a young man who, well, he's a baby at the time. He was from German parents, and he was raised by Native people. And by the Native people standards of that time, and before, say, I don't even know when to tell you, probably the 1970s, he would have been considered Native American because he was raised with them. He only spoke their language. He knew all their customs. And when he eventually, and I don't know if this is the original story that Little Big Man, the movie with Dustin Hoffman, came from, but it sounds a lot like it. Except for I think he was Irish in that movie, but I forget. There's all kinds of things that happen. This young man was raised as Native American, and eventually he found his way to society as non-natives. I'm trying to be politically correct here. Call it. And he eventually had to learn to speak English and his German language again, and it was difficult for him. So I'm not telling you that a non-native is what it takes to make a Native American flute. The Indian Arts and Crafts Act has a specific way that it words that, and if you are making Native American flutes and you're not a Native American that can prove that you're a Native American, I guess to whatever degree that they want you to prove it, you really need to think about what you're calling your flutes, because they will ding you for it and charge you thousands of dollars and put you in jail and all kinds of crazy stuff. I have actually spoken at a Senate meeting in recent times. I went to for the Indian Arts and Crafts Act and them wanting to change some of the verbiage of it to disclude people like myself who aren't a member of a federal tribe, although I am a member of a historic and state tribe. They wanted to exclude us, but when I had my 3 minutes to speak, I didn't talk about that. There were plenty of brilliant people that talked about it. What I talked about was something nobody had mentioned at the time, and that was the Department of Interior had on their website that they also wanted to include non-Native American items to be considered Native American made. And that don't fly with me. If you don't know anything about it, feel free to look it up. I'm not going to answer a lot of questions on that here. I've mentioned it briefly off and on. What the Senate meetings include is public record. So you can find all kinds of stuff if you look for it. Lies and truth, by the way. But that is the truth. That was something on their website. And so I'm not one who believes that a non-native can't make a Native American flute. At this time in history, and with the legalities, they're calling them Native American style flutes, and I'm completely cool with that. But when I say, think about what it is you want out of a Native American flute, I'm reminded of someone who I've had a lengthy discussion with in YouTube comments recently who wants me to make an Arabic flute on a Native American flute scale or pattern. They want Arabic fingerings so that they can play it, because I don't know if it was a fajar or what it is that they want me to make, but they want me to make something that is based on that fingering pattern and that key in this style flute. Think about what it is that you're asking. Do you want to play a fajar? There's a lot of people out there that sell them and make them. There's instructions online on YouTube, even how to make a fajar. If that's not the type that you want to make, if you want to make XYZ type flute, make that so that it will be that type of flute. Otherwise, it may not sound the same. Historically, I don't believe Native Americans made flutes out of walnut. I've had so many people ask me for walnut flutes over the years, and that's because one of my quote-unquote competitors, who I have no ill will towards that I'm aware of, makes a lot of walnut flutes, and that's cool. I have nothing against them. But does that hard wood produce a flute that sounds like a historic Native American flute? Probably not. Does a flute with a fingering that you have to keep covered up all the time produce a sound of a historic flute? It can, if you know how to play it right by keeping that fingering covered up all the time. Otherwise, it's going to make some crappy sounds that you're not going to like. Historically, I don't think Native Americans, my people, other people, any people of the Americas made flutes that sounded certain ways based on certain types of fingering patterns today and out of certain woods. Now, have I made walnut flutes? Yes I have. I've sold them to people in the past. I might be making some in the future. But that doesn't represent the sound, I believe, of what a Native American flute really should sound like. So keep that in mind. It doesn't take just the human touch, obviously. It also takes experience, know-how, foresight, There's a lot of stuff that goes into this. I'm not trying to deter you from making flutes. As a matter of fact, my whole channel is about you learning how to make flutes. But there's a way to go about it and a way not to go about it. And that's what I'm trying to teach you. So I hope this has helped. Hope you all have enjoyed this video and you've got a lot out of it and that you've learned something, especially in lines with can AI make a flute. Maybe in the future, and maybe if I'd give it more directions, it probably could have done something a little better, but gosh, it was painful making this flute because I knew from the moment that it told me the fingerings, it wasn't going to play right in any way, shape, or form, and me trying to find a way to make it play was difficult. So anyway, I hope y'all have enjoyed it nonetheless. I really enjoyed it. It's one of my favorite videos I've ever made because this was a cool experience. And if you want to learn how to make flutes the right way, we do have videos on that. If you want to experiment a little bit, I've got some videos where I've experimented. I've made flutes out of pallets. I've made flutes out of all kinds of crazy stuff. And something worth looking into, especially my agave flute video that my buddy had sent me a piece of agave to make a flute out of. You really should watch that one. So check it out. Anyway, Charlie Mato-Toyela for Blue Bear Flute signing out. Y'all take care. I hope to see you again very soon.